Aaron Hale is a guy who's been through more than most of us can even imagine. In 2011, while on deployment in Afghanistan, an IED explosion took his sight. And if that wasn't enough, years later, he lost his hearing too.
The bomb had taken both my eyes and had cracked my skull, so it was actually leaking spinal fluid right out my nose. It had blown out both my eardrums, though I could still hear. I had some hearing loss.
Welcome, entrepreneur movers and shakers. This is the Tony D'Urso Show. You're at the right place. I thank you for joining in with us. Now let's be real for a second. Being an entrepreneur is no joke. It's exciting, sure, but it can feel like an endless uphill battle. You put everything on the line, your time, your money, your energy, and sometimes it feels like you're running on fumes. And there are days when nothing seems to go right, when setbacks pile up and you wonder, why am I even doing this? But here's the thing. Success isn't about never facing obstacles. It's about pushing through them. And today's guest, he knows a thing or two about overcoming adversity. Aaron Hale is a guy who's been through more than most of us can even imagine. He served in the military as a Navy chef and later as an Army Explosive Ordnance Disposal, EOD, team leader. You know, the guys who defuse bombs. In 2011, while on deployment in Afghanistan, an IED explosion took his sight. And if that wasn't enough, years later, he lost his hearing too. Now, most people would have given up, but not Aaron. Instead, he turned his situation into a whole new chapter. He became an entrepreneur, built a successful chocolate company, Extraordinary Delights, and he's taken on insane adventures like mountain climbing, kayaking, and running marathons. This is one of those conversations that's going to change the way you see obstacles, not just in business, but in life. If you've ever hit a wall and thought, I don't know how to keep going, Aaron's story is going to fire you up. So stick around, because if there's anyone who can show us what resilience really looks like, it's Aaron Hale. Let's dive in. Let's bring him on. Hi, Aaron. Welcome to the Tony D'Urso Show.
Tony, thank you for inviting me. This is an absolute honor. You've got a great show, and it's a pleasure to be here and share with your audience.
Aaron, the honor is mine. I absolutely am so taken by some of your information, and the video that's on your homepage is, I urge everyone to check that out. It's short, but it's powerful. And that said, we're all looking forward, Aaron, to learning how to develop a bulletproof resilience. And let's start here. Your story is absolutely incredible. I mentioned a few things. And before we get into the big topics today, can you take us back to your journey? What led you to military service? How did you transition from the Navy to becoming an Army EOD team leader?
Absolutely. You know, those stories of boys that play soldier, and they absolutely know their whole lives that they were going to join the military and serve their country. That was not me. I absolutely knew my whole life until about a month before enlisting that I would never be in the military. It just wasn't me. I was the all-American slacker. I could have gone pro in doing nothing. I have no ambition, no goals, no. I mean, no. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, and I had just enough natural talent and abilities, topped off with little BS to get by without having to try very hard. And it was the BC type of grades. But when I got to college, that's when everybody who knew how to work hard and had some work ethic just passed me right by. And soon enough, the school had invited me to leave. So I needed to turn my life around. It was a very embarrassing time. I was very ashamed of my performance or lack thereof. So I wanted to turn my life around, learn those intrinsic, internal values of achievement, pride in hard work, and all of that. And I needed to earn the tuition money back that I just wasted away, pissed away, almost literally. And the military would provide that for me, all of it. So I joined the Navy to become a chef because the original plan was to do 4 years and get out and go to culinary school. Then I accidentally, while earning those internal values, started picking up some of those external values, like pride in team effort and a sense of duty, honor, and selfless service. So I made the military career. And along the way, I also realized that those skills and abilities that I had, the natural ones, the learned ones, and all of those extra ones I learned while in my service, that cooking just wasn't the highest and best use of my talents. And that's when I turned from, I guess you could say I jumped ship. I went from cooking for a 3-star admiral to switching uniforms and becoming an explosive ordnance disposal team leader. That's the military's bomb squad, that hurt locker guy. That's what led me to my 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq in between. And it was on that 3rd deployment, the 2nd time to Afghanistan, when I was actually the guy that gets into the bomb suit, makes that long, lonely walk. And about 8 months into a 12-month deployment is when one of them had my name on it.
What a story. And I did see Bomb Blocker, and it's I don't have the right words. It's startling, amazing, sad, just so many emotions come up. Aaron, can you walk us through that experience? How you processed like such a massive shift in your life?
Well, it's almost embarrassing to say how I followed the steps of loss, of grief, almost exactly. Denial, and I don't remember how it went specifically, but it was, I went through this depression. I went through bargaining. I was angry, and then it started to turn that corner of acceptance. But the truth was, the bomb had taken both my eyes and had cracked my skull. So it was actually leaking spinal fluid right out my nose. It had blown out both my eardrums, though I could still hear. I'd had some hearing loss. And I was lying in the hospital bed of Walter Reed, just feeling sorry for myself and angry and asking all those questions. What if? Why me? What if I'd done something else? What if I'd stepped a different way, or taken a different approach, or used a different strategy? All of those why me's, what ifs, the demons, I call them, those voices, the negative talk in the back of your head, they don't lead anywhere. It's a dead end. It's just kind of circular thinking, and all it leads is down the drain. So it was the support of my family. It was the other warriors up and down the halls of that military hospital that were fighting their own battles. They were pushing forward. And I realized that even though I'm going through this, and my life had changed forever, I'm never going to see it again, that I'm still Aaron Hale. I'm still a soldier. I'm still an EOD technician. I'm a father, a son, a husband. I have all these roles to play. And I am not just responsible for other humans. I'm responsible to them. And I'm responsible to my fellow warriors, those fellow service members and veterans. And also that if they could carry on the fight, who am I to say that I have a monopoly on pain? My reason is a great excuse to quit. I don't. I couldn't. Not in comparison. Not in comparison to my own life. Not from the things I've learned. So I decided then and there that I was going to get back in the fight myself, and I was going to do the hard work. And that's when I decided that if I was going to be blind, then I'm going to be the best darn blind Aaron Hale I could be. That's how I turned it around at that hospital.
That is so inspiring, Aaron. Excuse me. That is powerful. That is inspiring. We're speaking with Aaron Hale, talking about developing bulletproof resilience. And you can find out him and more about him at EODFudge.com. Yes, you heard me right. EOD, which stands for Extraordinary Delights, if I'm not mistaken, and Fudge. That's right, Fudge. So it's EODFudge.com. We'll hopefully talk more about that in just a few moments. But on this focus here, Aaron, we all need resilience. We're entrepreneurs, we're business owners, we're career-minded, we're in school, we're a mix of the audience here. And nobody does, is that the right way to say it grammatically? Everyone has their challenges. There's no one that I've ever run into ever that has had a perfect life, except maybe one, kind of. Though if everything's handed to you from the day you're born, does that make it a perfect life? What do you learn? So that's why I said maybe. But aside from that, everyone else, when everything seems stacked against you, what was that mindset that kept you pushing forward? Was it just that you just wanted to be the best you were, or were, as you were just saying, that was it? You said, hey, I'm now going to be the best. I'm going to be the best that I can be.
For one, I hadn't lost my purpose. Yes, I'd lost my job, more or less. I couldn't be an EOD technician anymore. I couldn't be a bomb tech. They don't like it even when you're colorblind, much less fully blind. But I still had a mission. I was still a warrior. I was still a soldier. And most importantly, I was still a father. And what would my kids say if I just quit? What kind of an example would I lead? I had this ethical imperative to be and do the absolute best I could, no matter the situation that's handed to me or the road I take, whatever choices I make and decisions I make. And that's really the most powerful part, is realizing no matter what happens is that we have the power to decide, even if it's which course to take, or simply if some situation's handed to you, how to imagine, the type of perspective you're going to take on it. Are you going to be, is it going to be an excuse for failure? Or is it going to be a reason? Is it data? Is it something to learn from? And one of the biggest things that helped me get through this was changing the whole perspective from things that are happening to me to things that are happening for me. How is this going to make me stronger? What am I going to learn from the different situations, however big or small? What am I going to learn from this? And I would take it one step further even, because if you look at it, any perspective, any situation that in which you can say, what can I learn from this? You go one step further and say, what can I learn from this that I can teach others? There was a saying once, I don't know where I heard it or read it, but it said, someday the story of your struggle might be the blueprint for someone else's survival. Now, I have been handed or walked into or stepped on an incredibly wild story. And I could either hold it to myself or I could use it for other people's benefit. So if I can face the challenges and I can get through it, and then I can turn back and say, listen, I've done this. I've done hard things and I've faced these challenges. And yes, it's going to be painful. It's going to hurt. It's going to be awful at times, but I survived. You know what? I'm living my best life. I love my life. I'm grateful for so many things. So I can teach and I can show and I can, motivate and inspire.
Aaron, while you're saying that, I'm thinking of, this conversation we've had and all the circumstances that have come up. And I'm thinking of, some people get into blaming themselves. And I know you went through that period. Why me? Something goes wrong, you think it's all you. When that comes up, because hurdles come, how do you shift from that mindset of being the victim to, hey, I'm the warrior, I'm going to beat this? How do you do that?
Well, first, emotions, especially I mean, I guess not especially, but all emotions are like signals. The beeps and things on your car dashboard, check engine light. What's that about? Right? The binging, the pinging, whatever the beeps that tell you that your seatbelt isn't on. How about in your house, the smoke alarm? That's like pain. The smoke alarm, the pain itself isn't the problem. It's the signal. So whenever I'm feeling those, you can call them negative feelings, hurt, anger, pain, sadness, depression. That's the signal. So it's being able to recognize it as, for what it is, rather than just standing there and staring at the smoke detector, the alarm going off and going, that is really loud and annoying, but not doing anything about it. Letting the car ping or the warning lights on the dash continue to flash but not doing anything about it. So it takes a more pragmatic look at your emotions. Yes, I'm feeling sad. Why is that? Yes, this situation is awful. It's frustrating. What can I do about that to change the situation? And again, turning back to what can I do in this moment that'll be the most teachable thing I can do for somebody else? How can I fix my own situation so that somebody else can learn from the example? So the best way to turn any harsh situation is to be creative, be curious. If you're curious about the situation, if you're asking those questions like, what's happening here? How did I get here? How do I get out of it? What can I do to fix the situation? Then you're not worrying about the pain, the anger, the frustration, the sadness itself. You're working on bettering your situation.
Very, very good points. I really like that, the trigger of emotion. After you get the super anger and the near violence out of the way, a slight little joke here, but after that's out of the way, then it's like, how do I fix this? What do I do? Because we run into this. The world changes. It's changed so many times. Just even while I've been podcasting, that's a whole nother topic. But with that, perhaps a tie-in that I didn't expect is Newton's first law of inertia. You call that his first law of kicking ass. And I love the way that you tie that to physics. And can you break that down for us a little bit in terms of how inertia applies to success?
Exactly. I mean, it's that first law is a body at rest tends to stay at rest. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. So you might be in a rut. You might be stuck right now, and it's hard to get moving. It's hard to take that first action. But all you got to do is take a little step, one little thing. What do they say? The 1% change from where you are right now. Whether that's getting to the gym, whether that's trying to improve your work situation as entrepreneurs, it's getting something done in that the whirlwind of busy work. It's getting something accomplished that helps set up the systems or hire or whatever it is. Just take one more step, get one thing accomplished. And one success leads to another. And eventually you're making bigger and bigger successes. One easy example is while I was in the hospital, the doctors and the nurses and the medical staff, they were fixing my injuries. But at the same time, I was getting really unhealthy. I was lying around. I wasn't very active. They were feeding me like I was going through SEAL training. So I had gained a ton of weight. So when I got on my feet, I started trying to figure out how to be an active blind person. And the first thing was I looked up, to figure out how to use the accessible computers and phone, and I would search for blind plus outside, blind plus running, blind plus climbing, whatever it was. And a few people would start popping up. And Aaron Weinmeyer, the first blind person to climb Mount Everest, or Lonnie Bedwell, the first blind person to kayak the entire Grand Canyon, is 256 miles of whitewater. And it's absolutely amazing. But what I did, I looked those guys up and I went, mountain climbing. I went whitewater kayaking with these guys. And simply put, I would reach out to, some neighbors and say, hey, I just want to go for a jog. What if we just held onto a tether and I run shoulder to shoulder with you and we'll figure it out together? And that's how I got out. I just lace up and run out the door with my partner. And I would take one step after the other. But I would also look for mentors, coaches, teammates, partners that would help me get there along the way. But each time I would take one step, I would do maybe, when it came to kayaking, it would be flat, not moving, just a lake. And I would practice how to stay upright instead of spending more of my time upside down in that kayak. But then I would get onto moving water, maybe class 1 rapids, and then class 2. It was a progression. But if I just got in a boat and expected to go do class 5 rapids or try to run a marathon without having, any training whatsoever, it would, be completely ridiculous, and I would almost certainly fail. But it would also look absolutely overwhelming. It's like looking at the top of a mountain and having never climbed it before from the bottom. It would be scary, overwhelming. But if you just say, I'm going to climb to that next ridge, if I can get that far, maybe I can get further. So that's the power of inertia, little successes.
And what you've just described there is the first part of the Newton's law, a body at rest stays at rest. Well, you've looked up, you did searches of how to get through and what to do, and you went from being at rest to actually taking action, actually doing something, actually breaking out from being completely stuck, which is very good. It's one of my taglines I use at the very end of my show, where I say, just take action. Because if you're stuck, if you're not doing it, it could be all the best advice in the world. But if you're not doing it, if you're not following it, nothing happens. So you got to take action.
Well, Ray Kroc, I think, said something along the lines of, you're either green and growing or you're brown and dying. And I, for one, if I find myself staying still for too long, either literally or metaphorically, I start to feel the wheels start to fall off. I start feeling myself backtrack. I don't think there is a such thing as a stasis, balance. Whenever anybody finds themselves sitting in that comfort zone for too long, doing themselves a huge disservice. And it's going, like I said, a body at rest tends to stay at rest, and that's not good. So we got to keep taking action.
And now I want to mention the flip side of that, because once you get moving and you're doing something, you're active in whatever field or topic or category. Mm-hmm. Well, any advice on how to avoid backsliding? and having that fear crop up. But you wanted to mention something else. Go ahead.
Oh no. It's just that if you run, for example, like again, the running, if you run a half marathon or two, it's not that big a leap to go to a full marathon. Because you've accomplished that. You've already achieved something big that most Americans, at least most humans, have never done, run 13.1 miles. So it's actually a bigger hurdle in your mind than the actual physical feat. So the inertia, that taking action, it's a mental momentum. And each time you take those little steps, and they can get bigger and bigger, but it's all about mindset and having that growth rather than a fixed positioning. You keep making that, those action steps, taking those action steps, and keep adding success after success. Of course, there are times when, like you mentioned, back steps, and that's okay. But see, each time you have these successes, each time you work those muscles, work that mind, you become more resilient. So even and of course, these hurdles, these hardships along the way, they're going to happen. In fact, like we've mentioned earlier, when you introduced me, I went blind in 2011. I didn't go deaf until 2015. So it was like, God, after I'd learned how to become blind, and I was, I guess, on my way to blindness mastery. I don't know. But I was whitewater kayaking, mountain climbing, running marathons. I was speaking, and I was telling my story. And then I guess I like to think that God has, that soldier's sardonic humor. He's like, well, if you think you're hot stuff, try it again. And he put me back in the hospital. But that's all right, because I had something more to learn. And, the meningitis had stolen what the bomb blast hadn't taken from my hearing and left me completely blind and deaf. If not for this cochlear implant right here, I'd be pulling the full Helen collar. But it was a long, long time before I could actually hear again. It was over a year between the meningitis and being able to have a conversation like you and I are having right now. So that's a time where it was lonely, I was frustrated, I was trapped inside my body. The entire world ended at my fingertips. I mean, that's a really lonely place to be. And it was a long time to be stuck in my head. For one, I built up the resilience that first time. And for my time in the military, it was a great example. Military, the EOD technicians, there's a team leader and two team members, and they were given a huge shipping container full of tools to combat all the hazards that it's their job, they're tasked with combating. Everything from bullets to weapons of mass destruction and nuclear bombs. It's their job. They're the first responders on the battlefield to mitigate that. So that's a lot of tools. Anyways, when we get to the battlefield, we get this armored truck, and we got to fit as many tools as we can in there, but it's smaller than the shipping container. So we got to leave a little bit, we have to leave some that we might not do. It's like doing triage. Yeah. Leave the tools you're least likely going to need behind. And then on deployment to Afghanistan, there are no roads. It's all like dirt trails that our trucks couldn't fit on. So we would have to go dismounted or on foot. And then we could only bring what tools we could carry on our backs. So it ended up being some like blocks of sea floor, rope, carabiners, knives, and then our food, ammunition, water, that kind of stuff. So we still had a mission. We still, still had a job to do, but we had to leave some tools behind. Anyways, it's like General Jim Mattis said in his book, Call Sign Chaos, is that the things being hard were never a good excuse for mission failure. So we would use our creativity, and we would use the tools and the resources and the personnel and our, the skills of all the warriors out there to figure it out. And we would do the job, even though we had to leave some tools behind. And that's what I had to do. I had to leave a couple of tools behind, but I still had a mission here at home.
That's absolutely something. And I want to talk more about that. And as you're saying this, I'm thinking of one of your quotes. You talk about building a culture of reasons, not excuses. And I'm thinking of that with what you're saying. You still got to do the job. You can't drive in. You got to take what you can. You've got to move through. It's sort of like, you can't say, oh, I can't bring all my tools, so I can't do the job. You're focused on your mission, the culture of reasons, not excuses. I'd love to talk more about that and explain that a little bit more to the audience.
It's also, the theory behind extreme ownership or radical responsibility is that looking at something, because excuses are saying, I can't. Right? They're the lies we tell ourselves that get us off the hook for putting in the hard work and moving forward. We just say, this is the situation, so I guess I can't. But see, can't shuts the door on opportunity. It pulls up the welcome mat from creativity, and it cancels out any opportunity to move forward. But if you turn around, you use the information, that same thing, it could be an excuse, turn it into a reason, data that you can use to say, how can I? So this won't work. So I'm going to have to figure out another way. All right. I can't see, so I have to use the technology around me. I have to use a cane, my smartphone with a camera, and AI now is a huge helper. I use these tools. I use my family, even my kids, to help me to sort the mail or whatever it is. But I find ways. And, what's that word? Well, some people are finding excuses. Winners find a way.
I like that. I like that a lot. And part of that, I think, is that, and I know I've run into it, and I've just run into it on multiple occasions in my own podcasting, believe it or not, that there's hurdles and setbacks. And these problems, they can get really real. And you don't think of, you don't even think sometimes of, is there a way around it, or how do I get through it? It's like there's money problems or time problems or support. And it's like that you've got to look at it and go, well, am I making excuses, or is this a real issue? Do I really need to go around this? Do I need to detour, or do I just bust through? Where, am I, you kind of have to go into, well, am I lazy? Am I trying to trick myself into not doing the work? Or do I really just need to bust through? You kind of have to realize the level of severity of the issue and how to deal with it.
So the problem there is that you can't ignore those emotions, those signals, the alarms, that you can't ignore the pain. You got to give time to process. You can mourn the loss, or you could mourn your situation, the change, because, sometimes, of course, being comfortable, being happy, having eyesight, having hearing, I really like that. I like being able to see my family. I like being able to get in the car and just drive somewhere without having to ask, and all those other things. I really like doing that. I like being a bomb tech. I love saving lives. I also like blowing stuff up, which is, fun. But I can mourn that. I can lament it. But then at some point, you've got to ask, then what? Okay, here's your situation. This is it. You can't go back. So then what? What do you do next? Now, that's when you stop mourning and you start taking that action, and you get to work.
And with that, building a culture of reasons, you went from all of that to building a thriving chocolate business, EODFudge.com. I mean, I can only imagine the challenges that you faced. The only thing I am aware of so far is that you had a propensity for cooking. You're good. You're a chef. But how did that all happen? You know, that, hey, I'm going to go make chocolate.
Yeah. I tell people that, yeah, I went blind and then I went deaf and I was sitting there and I also lost my inner ear balance, the vestibular balance. So I came home in a wheelchair and I would fall off of like the breakfast bar stool if I weren't holding on to the counter. It was having that the vertigo, but, in being trapped in my body and all of that and being just got a terrible place in my life, I did what the next natural step for me and started a chocolate company. But the truth is, it was kitchen therapy. I knew I could still cook and Thanksgiving was coming up. So I decided to shift my focus away from me and the loss and the pain and all that. And I was simply going to focus on fixing this huge feast. So it's a great example of having, something to do to just take your mind off. And sometimes that's all we need is there's something to keep us busy so that we're not just dwelling. And then also focusing on others' comfort or someone helping others with their pain, creating, joy for somebody else. That also shifts that focus away from your own pain. Helping somebody else out of their pain actually reduces your own. So I started making a Thanksgiving feast, and I would make batch after batch of fudge. And my wife noticed two things. One was a smile on my face that she hadn't seen in about 6 months. And the other thing was that the fudge, it just started piling up. So she gave it away. She started sneaking it out the front door. Like, you got to be real stealthy around a blind, deaf guy. But she was giving it to friends, neighbors, and people started coming back and asking if they could buy some for an upcoming birthday party or a baby shower. And the capitalist in me said, well, of course you may. And me taking things, often taking things to the extreme, turned it into a business, Extraordinary Delights, or EODFudge.com, which is a little nod to my previous job of explosive ordnance disposal, EOD. But we rolled that into real estate investing. And then after that, of course, I started a podcast because I didn't have enough on my plate. So now that was the Point of Impact podcast with Aaron Hale.
It's amazing because you had, again, talking about that culture of reasons, you had every reason not to do it, and yet you did it. So it's really interesting. It's sort of like you went against the reason because it's quite, I don't even know what to say, but it's quite a predicament or a situation to be in. And yet you still defied the odds. It's just absolutely amazing what you've done. And I want to go somewhere with this because looking back at everything you've been through now, Aaron, you're now talking to entrepreneurs and leaders and business owners. And what do you wish that they could know? What message would you like to give them?
Everybody goes through their hardships. And entrepreneurs are definitely not immune, especially in that startup phase. It was hard to learn because I knew how to make fudge. That doesn't mean I knew how to run a business. So all along that way, there were all these hurdles, these things I needed to learn, people I needed to hire all along the way. There are these growth pains. And there were plenty of times when we thought, man, this is too hard. Why did we even try? But yeah, success, it's just the other side of that less, the one more step beyond the one you don't think you could take. We can just go one more step. Usually it's not too far. You can take one more step and another, and you find that you've reached at least a point where you can take a breath, you can learn from it, and you can grow and get stronger. And then you become more resilient for the very next hard, hurdle ahead, because they're going to be there. But so long as you accept the fact that there are going to be challenges, it's like the Marcus Aurelius saying, what impedes action advances action. What lies in the way becomes the way. Just expect things to be challenging. Look forward to them. Look forward to what you're going to learn and grow, how you're going to grow, and what you can share with others, and the success that's going to come from you overcoming those challenges, and how much more fulfilling it is having had worked for it.
Absolutely agree with that. Very inspiring. I appreciate that. And speaking of challenges, are there any objectives or challenges that you're thinking, like, what's the future hold for Aaron? What's next for you?
Well, obviously, I'm a runner, but in 2023, I became the first blind deaf person to complete the Badwater 135, which is touted as the world's toughest foot race. So I went beyond marathons and running the Boston Marathon to going further and going harder. So running across Death Valley from the lowest point in North America to the highest point in, the contiguous 48. And I'm going to be looking to go back there pretty soon. I'm also running other marathons and ultra marathons, but here at home, it's raising 3 boys, growing this podcast, more success with the businesses, and just looking for the next challenge, the next being open to it, and see what happens.
So great. Once again, this is Aaron Hale. We're talking about developing bulletproof resilience, and you can find him at eodfudge.com. Aaron, I want to thank you for coming on the show, for talking, for inspiring us. A lot of good advice, great points of view, really, really good. I just want to thank you so much to have you on.
You're very welcome, Tony, and thank you for having me.
Here's a special thank you for those that listen to the end. Thank you so much. And if you like this, share this with your friends. Tell them about developing bulletproof resilience and what Aaron has been through and accomplished. And go get yourself some of that fudge too. And wherever you're getting this, would you please follow the show? It helps in bringing more amazing guests to you. All right. Use this and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks, and remember, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds, do good deeds, and I'll see you on the next episode.